Welcome to Practically Christian, where co-hosts Jake Silvera and Luke and Janelle Hyrant share conversations that help you know Jesus more deeply and follow him more faithfully. The truth is, no one has arrived at Christ's likeness. To grow in that direction, we believe you need authentic relationships and biblical theology applied to your everyday life. We hope that you're encouraged to grow and to live out the biblical truths that we discuss on this episode. Let's get practical and dive into a conversation about artificial intelligence.
Well, welcome back to Practically Christian, and we're going to continue our conversation about artificial intelligence. And once again, if you did not watch our episode we put out 4 weeks ago now, our conversation is building off this presentation I gave to our church community about AI and the Imago Dei, which just means the image of God. What does it mean to be human? How does AI technology fit into that? And so we're going to continue this conversation. Last time we talked about how AI is a powerful tool. Therefore, we should use it, but use it wisely. Today, we're going to talk about how AI is a powerful tool, and that tool is actually being used against us or on us in different ways. And so, for people unfamiliar with this and how this might be working in the background unknowingly, let's just start off with some examples of how algorithms are used to maybe keep us online or keep our attention or nudge us to buy more things.
Yeah, I mean, I was a little freaked out when our phones started having that, constant surveillance technology where they're basically listening. And I remember one time we were talking about, getting a new wallet or something like that for you. And then all of a sudden, and it was our phones were not on. They were, we were just talking about it. And after that, we got tons of advertising for wallets. And I was like, what? It was kind of like that, creeped out, it's listening, for advertising purposes.
Yeah. There were those people, there was an experiment done where they would, specifically only talk about a subject, and they never typed the word into their phone a single time. None of the people involved, they wouldn't use the word in text or whatever, but they would always talk about it, and they all started getting ads for it. It was skiing or something. It was they all started getting skiing ads even though they had never put it in. And it was kind of trying to prove yes, your phones are listening to you. Because there are still people in the tech industry who are no, that they don't listen to you. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But me and Joe, one of my friends, were running. This was 2 years ago. And he had not run in a long time. And one of the things that happens when you run really hard, if you haven't run in a while, is blood can actually go through the wall of your throat, and you'll start tasting iron because the blood goes into your throat. And while we were running, even to the point of he was I feel there's this metallic taste in my mouth. And then when we got back, the first ad he got was a news article about why you can taste blood in your throat after you run really hard. And he was I didn't even know what this was.
Wow. That's kind of freaky, isn't it?
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. My example is just Facebook Marketplace. Janelle and I like to buy things used, and we like the value of we buy almost all our clothes at thrift stores, and we used to be all about Craigslist, but Facebook Marketplace is a little more easy to interact with and better. But it's this mixed bag where, to me at least, it's very addictive, and it's interesting to see how Janelle and I live in the same town, in the same house. And we both search Facebook Marketplace, and we'll see different things because the algorithm is operating in the background, and it's calculating which things you've clicked on in the past and trying to show you more often more things like that versus things you've ignored. It'll show you less of those things, etc. But it is effective in the sense I have to put limits on phone use because it's this ooh, I wonder what's on there. I'm not even I don't even need anything, but it's is anything else new? And they've actually proven too that something similar happens in your brain that happens in casinos. In casinos, the slot machines, there's something that happens in your brain when you pull this lever and you don't know what's going to happen and these things start spinning and you don't know if you're going to win or not. The same thing happens with the pull to refresh on your phone. So whether that's Instagram or TikTok videos, or for me, Facebook Marketplace, that pull to refresh, you know, when you like swipe your finger down and it like spins and then it's going to have something new. And then I'm going to nerd out on psychology for a minute. Actually, there have been studies done where, so these are animal studies, but they now have shown that the same thing is true of humans, where they're trying to get animals to do a certain thing and almost like get them addicted to something. So they did this study where it was like, you know, every time you push this button, food comes out, like something sweet. And they had okay results. And then they did it again, and it's like, sometimes when you push the button, nothing happens. Sometimes when you push the button, food comes out. Sometimes when you push the button, a bunch of food comes out. And the animals, like, responded to that at a much, much higher rate than every time you push the button. Yeah, there's something about, like, the unknown. Like, will there be a good find or not? Will there be something new? Like, that is actually more addictive to us. And the algorithms know that are operating in the background. So any other examples as we get started, or thinking about that, or does that spur any other ideas?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a mystery, the data collection, and people buy data on, so it's like there's information on you that's being sold, and there's a market for that information.
That's
so
right.
I think that's just like and I think one thing that's really annoying, and it's just true, is if ever you're signing up to a new thing, it has like these long legal agreements and, you know, agree. I have read and agree, click, you know, but it's like, just, I mean, not many people even read through all that stuff, and they can even update their terms and just notify you that they've updated. So it's like there's legal stuff going on with it, but we're agreeing to be surveyed in some ways.
Yeah, I think the other one in my mind is like, I've heard a lot of people recently talk about like, don't put your voice online because then people will be able to copy it. And it's like, no, your phone listens to you. Someone could be sitting next to you on a subway train with a microphone and just riding the subway train and just collecting voices. There is no way to avoid your voice being collected in real life.
Yeah, that's true.
It's gonna happen, and in some sense we're going to have to adapt to the fact that people will be able to make any voice happen, and probably be able to do it pretty well.
Yeah,
like the deep fake type things.
Yeah.
Yeah, so AI is a powerful tool, and so the big idea today is like, be wise about how it's being used on you. I heard a quote, and I was trying to track it down. I know I heard it on a Carrie Newhoff podcast. I don't think I'm saying it quite right, but it was something along the lines of like, if there's no price, then you are the product. And just like talk about that idea, like if you're trying to explain that to someone else, that concept, because like Instagram is free, using Facebook is free.
Like there's no such thing as a free lunch.
Yeah, exactly. So what's going on in the background there?
I think the two big things are, number one, that for an advertiser, you're a fish in a barrel when you're on Instagram. Is right there. They're trying to keep you there because they're going to give you ads, and people are paying for access to the fish tank that you're swimming in, right?
Yep.
And I think the other one is, there does seem to be this, because I'm a little bit of a conspiracy theorist, a little bit of a maniacal or malevolent idea behind trying to collect as much information as possible. And it's, if you think about it for about 3 seconds, no one would ever need the information that they're collecting for your good. Right? Like, if it was for your good, they could ask. But it's not, because they're going to use it to try to manipulate you. They're going to, what you look at, what you like, what you comment, what political stuff you're involved with, or like what gets a rise out of you, different things, that's all going to be used.
Yeah. Well, and you brought this example up in our last podcast, Jake, but I think it's worth repeating and then applying to a different sphere, because a lot of people might just assume, as they look at various news sites, that they're just seeing current news, period. But for no news site I know of is that actually the case. Like, those news sites are operating with their own algorithms that are paying attention to what your IP address, where the device you're searching from, even what you're most likely to click on, spend time on, return to, and look at, and also the opposite of what things you just skim past. And it's going to feed you more stories that are more like that and in line with that. And the frustrating thing is, that's why people talk about this echo chamber that we kind of in some ways create for ourselves, but also that the algorithms push us towards, because At the end of the day, the algorithms, it's not that they don't care about the truth. An algorithm doesn't know what the truth is. It just knows what's out there as all these pieces of information or all these news articles, for example. And its job that it's been given by the website is keep people on here and analyze what they do and what they look at and keep them on here. Like, that's its job, to keep your attention for longer, not to feed you truth or feed you the most encouraging things. Or does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, and there's also, I think, some other like stuff going on where if you look at companies who own the hair care products that make you lose hair are also the companies that own the products that make you regrow hair. And so there is like connections in the advertisement of like, hey, we're going to advertise this product to you to put you in a position to need this other product, to put you in the position to need this other product, etc. And I think there's more connections like that than we probably realize about our information.
Yeah. So we're going to get a little theological, and then we're going to move to the practical side. So forecasting to the practical side, we're going to be talking about, like, what does this mean? Like, how do we practice digital hygiene is a term I really like and have heard recently. But before we get there, let's get theological and turn to the Bible. And Jake, when we were talking about this subject, you brought up the idea of the Tower of Babel and how that actually might be instructive for us to understand AI and its potential dangers. So let's talk through that a little bit. Like, what was that idea you had?
Yeah, so I think the idea is that building a tower is not a bad idea. And God would not punish or give someone consequences for building a tower. And that tower could be the exact same height as the Tower of Babel ended up being. But if the goal is to be able to see farther away with a telescope, then it's not a bad thing. But if the goal is to create a tower to usurp God or to like do something that you're not supposed to, then that tower becomes a negative thing. Even though the tower itself isn't negative, it's the intention behind it.
Right.
And I think this kind of goes back to like the superhuman idea or the superhuman transhumanism, where using AI as a brainstorming tool is not bad, but I would say I think there's a lot of the thought behind AI, and even a lot of the people behind the thought behind AI are trying to create another human. And I think it goes back to the idea where God says not to make anything in the image of the created order. Not meaning like don't make paintings, I don't think. But I think what it means is like in the way that God created humans in His image, we are not supposed to try to create anything in our image. And so I think AI is that exact thing for a lot of the people behind it. It's how can I create a human in my image? And kind of, in some ways, steal the job of God. Yeah.
Well, and I think that transhumanism is reaching for eternal life for, like, make yourself into a superhuman who can survive. You know, like that's.
Yeah, it's trying to push past the natural limits of.
And it's almost like
death.
Some of the like fantasy or sci-fi books, like where you can upload, you know, like a skill set or knowledge of the language or whatever. It's like, if you could upgrade your brain, would you do it? You know? It's like, I don't know. Maybe. But I think when it's reaching for eternal life, would you upload yourself to the cloud so that your physical body is no longer...
And I think the question that comes up with that, and there's actually literally a TV show called Upload, which, by the way, terrible season 3, and we're going to talk about that later, because it was obviously written by AI. No, but it's like the idea of, it goes back to the Star Trek question of, when you're dematerialized in a transporter, is the one who comes out the other side the same person as you, or is it a copy of you? Did you die in the transporter and now you're a new version of you? In the same way, if you upload yourself, are you really you? Or are you just a shallow copy of yourself? And I think that in some ways part of like the question of the Tower of Babel is we are reaching to recreate ourselves or recreate humanity, but we're going to end up creating a shallow version.
Yeah.
Well, and I would say too, I think we've had podcasts in the past about the physical body as being part of ourselves. Like, whereas
We're integrated beings.
yeah, and now I think people almost think of their online self or their avatar, is like their true self, or in some sense that's totally separated from their physical being. And as Christians, we don't understand that separation as being even possible. Like, we are integrated. So I think in some senses, it would have to be a shallower self, or like not even a self. Like, it could just upload some of your memories. Almost like if you had movies of my memories, do you have me? No. If you had a ChatGPT that was trained to answer the way that I usually answer, is it me? No. So it's
and so just to throw out there too, what I think is interesting about this is it like raises the whole conundrum of like, well, can I use these technologies if they're being developed for this bigger purpose that I don't buy into? Now, I'm okay with that because like there's all kinds of things we use on an everyday basis, and the original goal of the person is like, I don't know, to make a lot of money and be a rich person and to be really selfish. Like, that's their goal, that's their intention by making this product or software that we end up buying. And in some ways, like, I can evaluate the good itself on its own terms without having to be like, no, the person who made this, right? It can get more complicated than that. But at the end of the day, I think, like, yeah, I do know that some of the tech people behind some of the developments that we have, their ultimate goal is like, yeah, we want general artificial intelligence, this sentient supercomputer that will, I don't know what they think will happen, but it'll be something great in our image, like you were talking about, Jake. Or some of them really want, like, we want to push past the limits of death or past the limits of our own thinking brains and improve those to the point where we're no longer human, where we leave humanity as it currently is behind. And like the gospel message is like Jesus saves, not technology, and that's where salvation is found. And so, yeah, I guess I just want to clarify that even if that's like the thinking or the reason for some of the advancements that we have, you don't have to be like, so all of this is clearly evil, right? For example, in the Tower of Babel story, they figured out this technology of bricks, this new technology that they then used to make the Tower of Babel. And it's like, the equivalent in our time would be like, bricks are evil now. It's like, no, the Tower of Babel was evil and the intentions behind it, but we can use bricks to make something else.
Yeah, I would point out, I think, that often there is a maligning of people who look toward the future and say, this is going to be used for negative things.
Yeah.
And they go, oh, you're fear-mongering, you're thinking about the worst-case scenario. And I also think it's fair that the worst-case scenario is probably going to happen. And if we look throughout, like, history, right, when the internet first became a thing, people are like, this is not going to be good, there's going to be too much connectivity, and there's going to be porn. And you know what? That's exactly what happened. And you know what? Those people, even today, are maligned as, wow, they were fear-mongers. Like, no, they were right. Like, and in some ways, we have to understand that when you look at unforeseen circumstances, you're going to be right and you're going to be wrong, but there are going to be those real issues that are going to happen.
Yeah. Now, to build off that, though, because the fear-mongering that I remember is like, the internet's going to do X, Y, and Z, therefore never use the internet was the application of that. And so I think that's more of like what I'd be like, no, like, yes, there are downsides and consequences, but you can use the internet. You have to be careful how you use it, you have to be wise in how you use it, but you can use it. So how would you respond to that, Jake? And a similar thing with AI.
Yeah, I think the question comes to me of, often we don't think about the consequences because we don't bear them. And often those consequences are borne by other people who can't escape them. I'm thinking about cell phones specifically when we talk about the way that cadmium is mined for cell phones. With your hands, people die in mines that have 10,000 people digging with their hands, right, in Africa. And yet we go, oh, cell phones, like, our biggest struggle with them is making sure not to use them too much. And it's like, actually, we're outsourcing a lot of the negative things that come out of it. And so with AI, I think there in some ways it could very much hurt the artistic community or people who do art in general, right? Because it's there's going to be, I think, the separation of there will be a high tier person who people will still pay for art from, but if you're getting general art, you're just going to do it with AI, and that could really hurt those group of people. So I think part of what we need to think about is maybe we're hurting others, not necessarily ourselves, with some of the things. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
There are ripple effects.
There are ripple effects, and there are there is harm done a lot of the time that we don't see. And I think the internet, right? Theoretically, we're just gonna throw out theoretical. Like, if we found out that the internet caused cancer, which microwaves from cell phones have a lot of negative side effects, but let's say like the internet causes cancer or 5G causes cancer. The unfortunate thing is that individuals don't get to choose if they're willing to pay that price. The group gets to choose if we're going to pay that price as a group. And that's kind of like the scary part about like AI or any of these technological advances. Are a lot of the people who have the power to make the decisions are also those who don't care about the other people involved. I don't know. Sorry, that might be a little bit rambly, but
yeah. I mean, we want to focus on like how artificial intelligence is being used as a tool, like on us or against us, or to capture our attention or to cause us to spend more. So yeah, let's turn actually for a minute to like the practical side of. Because on a practical level, what this means is that whatever app you use, like I don't even care what app it is, increasingly so, if not already, it's going to be built in with algorithms that are programmed to keep you on it longer. Because the more time you spend on that app, the more time they can advertise to you, and the more information they can collect about you. So like Instagram's going to become just more addictive.
Yeah, it will never become less addictive.
It'll never become less addictive than it is now. And that goes, again, for any app you use. Facebook Marketplace, like I was talking about with me, is going to become more addictive. And so what are, like, some digital hygiene things we can practice and that people should consider adopting in their own lives as they say, okay, like, this is a powerful tool. It probably knows me emotionally in some ways better than I know myself, and knows my own temptations for spending or for giving my attention to this better than even I know them. So what does that mean about as far as kind of being on guard against that?
Yeah,
I think we need to take frequent opportunities to reflect and like notice, because I think a lot of times when we're not noticing our own habits, I think that's when we can fall into really bad patterns and habits that we wouldn't choose for ourselves. You know what I mean? Like if you could design how you're going to spend your extra, let's say you have 2 hours a day that are not planned. If you could design that and you could say, I'm going to practice this instrument or do art or I'm going to clean my house really well, or I'm going to work on my budget or whatever it is, and you could do anything, a lot of us would not choose scrolling as the thing. Because if you use your intentionality, what you would choose for yourself is not going to be something totally brain dead. But in the moment, that's what we're going to choose. And the same thing went for watching TV and for binge watching Netflix or whatever it is. Like, I feel like we need to have those moments of reflection in order to decide for ourselves the things that we want to invest in. And I think that will have the ripple effects in our lives of like, have I spent time in scripture and yet I had time to scroll for however long, it shows your priorities by like de facto priorities essentially. But I think that's been true forever. I just think now it's a little bit more challenging because things are kind of crying out for your attention, or we use our phones for other reasons and then get drawn into it or whatever. So I think those moments of reflection can make a big difference. Yeah. No, I like what I heard you say is, times of reflection to consider how we are currently spending our time, and then within that too, how we want to spend our time. And I think there's a lot of research in like pre-deciding is actually extremely powerful. Like, to use a ridiculous example, like when I have to use the bathroom, am I going to scroll or not?
or what apps are okay to use or not, or when I have a minute, like, or how much time do I want to spend on whatever app. Like I tend to spend
put the limits on it.
Yeah, to consider ahead of time and pre-decide. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, I think cultivating abstinence and discernment.
Okay.
So there's been a lot of research recently about advertising and actually how it can become less effective the more you see the same ads or the same advertisings. And so I think just knowing, for me personally, knowing that someone is collecting my information to advertise things to me makes me less likely to give into those advertisements. Because I'm an obstinate person. But like I think going like kind of practicing that and in like the discernment idea of knowing that certain things are being given to you because they believe that they're going to work. And so if you get a lot of ads for a thing that you don't think you should be interested in, or if you get a lot of ads that have a lot of sexual themes going, oh, why does the algorithm think that I'm susceptible to this? And using that for reflection. Or if you're only getting news articles that are extremely bombastic, being, oh, does the algorithm think that I'm susceptible to this? Why is it giving me this? Or in the same ways, like, if I've never heard of something that feels like it should be a big thing, when, being like, oh, why did I not hear about this? And kind of using that kind of discernment of kind of being aware of what's going on and using that for reflection.
Yeah.
And the other thing, going back to the TV show Upload, that I said 100% confident that it was written by AI. It was, I literally watched the first 3 episodes with my roommate, and I felt like I was having like an LSD episode. But one of the things that was going on with it is those things, even if they're really bad, are designed to keep your attention. There's a lot of the most famous people on YouTube or a lot of the famous like celebrity stuff. It's not good. It has very little merit, even like artistically, but it's really good at keeping your attention. Even like someone was talking about Mr. Beast videos, and they were like, you can watch a Mr. Beast video and you couldn't even say what happened at the end of it, but you were engaged the whole time because the way it functions, your brain is like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And at the end, you're like, what the crap did I just watch? But that's fine, because another Mr. Beast video is on.
Yeah, it's kind of like junk food. Like, you just want to keep eating it, and then once you eat a bunch of it, you're like, I don't feel good.
But I think the idea of discernment is when something is bad or when something feels off, to follow those instincts rapidly. Yeah. And not to like it's like the thing I think with TV shows too, is like during a commercial, if you forgot what you were watching during the commercials, then you probably should change the channel or get up and go do something else. Yeah. In the same way, if like a TV show is like bad, you should not like give it your attention. You should either find something that's worth your attention or go do something else that's worth your attention.
So as we think about this, it was reminding me of a book that you had got, Janelle, a few years ago called The Tech-Wise Family. And I thought they had actually like some really good ideas, and they were very careful not to give like prescriptions, like everyone should do this with technology. But there were some like good digital hygiene ideas, and the ones I remember, and if you guys have any like other like, I want to say like almost basic rules for people to consider, because I think reflecting and pre-deciding are very good. But I think even more than that, like, at least for me, it's times when, the classic halt, hungry, angry, lonely, tired, is when I'm more susceptible to giving my time and attention to things I shouldn't, like just mindlessly watching YouTube videos and fail army forever. That's one of me and Janelle's hobbies sometimes. So, like, if there's rules we can implement, or at least principles or ideas people can consider. So, for example, some of the things they presented in that book was like, phones should always go to bed before you do and wake up after you. And like, I like that in the sense of like, treat your phone as a kid and also as a powerful tool because it's access to the internet. And then on the other side, there's these algorithms vying for your attention, right?
Please ignore the obvious comparison to child labor that Luke just made, which was, it's like a kid that's also a tool.
Oh man, yeah, but like things like that. I also know that like there's some apps you can get and download that limit your time on other apps, and that's not a bad call if you're having trouble with that.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I feel like one of the things in the book, and it's been a while since I read it, so it's a little blurry, but I think they took at least 1 hour a day where they would not have their phone, and then 1 day a week where that was like maybe on just for calling, but not for for like any other use, and then like 1 week a year or something like that.
I think so.
Where
I think that's
would
right. Yeah.
just not have their phone for maybe on vacation or something. You just don't use it at all, and it almost I don't think that's necessarily like prescriptive. Like I don't think you have to do that exactly, but I think if we continually use something, we don't reflect on our use. I think you do have to take a break from something and kind of like retreat from it in order to and it also breaks your addictive cycles a little bit. If you have a like every week you realize, I know this has been true for me, I realize how often I reach for that. And how often I'm like, oh, I want to listen to something right now. And I'm like, no, this is my day of not listening to podcasts or whatever. So I think it gives you opportunities to observe your behavior in a different way when you don't have access to it.
Yeah.
Now, what's funny is the way you guys are talking about it seems to me like the same way that people kind of talk about drugs. Which is like, they're really addictive and like they can be used for good. But it also sounds to me like one of those people who's like, I can quit anytime. Like, you know, where it's just like, and maybe the greater assessment needs, there needs to be more assessment of the value that it brings versus the harm that it can bring. I think in my own life too, like, what is the harm versus value thing versus just what are some parameters we can put around it? Because is it even, I would say, with like the whole living intentionally thing that we've kind of talked about a little bit with AI, is like, how do you, does it actually have a place in living intentionally? Right? Does YouTube or television actually have a place when it comes to living intentionally? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, but I think we often assume that it does and then think about ways to protect it. When it might not. I don't know. Does that make sense?
No, it does. And I know a number of people who've gotten off of, they haven't gotten rid of their cell phone completely, but like off of a certain app. Was it, I can't remember if it was TikTok or Instagram or Facebook, but someone in their connection group was like, yeah, no, I just deleted the app and got off totally, and I'm really, really happy that I did. And they even did this interesting thing where they used to do like, I think 1 day a week or something, and they very quickly just stopped doing that too, where it's like, no, this is actually not helping me connect or increasing my well-being. So I think actually the question you're asking is a question we should ask. Like, it's there's in the Bible there's the idea of a Sabbath, and I think it's a very biblical principle. And not just that, I think it's God's gift to us to take a day out of every 7 and rest. And I think extending that idea to technology, I think there's like actually a lot of carryover there, where, you know, maybe not necessarily you have to rest from all technology on your Sabbath day, but there is wisdom to just stopping, like stop the input, stop the scroll, stop everything. And it'd probably be very wise to kind of stop everything for a period of time and see and really honestly evaluate. Because going back to the Sabbath example, and I think there's some carryover here, Jake, and this is what you were getting at, is that a lot of people when they're new to practicing Sabbath are like, video games are super restful for me. And they'll spend, you know, their whole Sunday playing video games. And then they realize, if they're reflective about it, that actually that's recreation, or sorry, no, it's
entertainment.
It's entertainment, it's not rest. And that they don't actually feel rested or refueled in any way or filled up emotionally by doing that. And yeah, there's a difference between entertainment and rest. And I think true rest is like this filling up thing. Yeah. So, the application this week, ironically, 2 weeks ago when we had our podcast, our application was try it. Play with ChatGPT or some kind of other form of AI and try using it as a tool. Our application this week is stop it. That we actually think is really wise and healthy, because AI is not just a tool we choose to use, but a powerful tool that's being used on us and to keep our attention or to cause us to spend more money or in other even more nefarious ways. And so we need to put some guidelines and borders around our use of technology, whether that's through your smartphone or through your computer or other device, because artificial intelligence algorithms are constantly seeing how can we keep your attention for longer and keep you focused on this rather than all of this and life. And it's very easy to fall prey to. Like, I was just thinking, at least for me, like, you know what? Once again, some of these things I go to and look at like have become more addictive, and I haven't been good at keeping those boundaries. And so the question we want you to consider is just what boundaries do you need to have in place to make sure that AI is not being used against you to keep you from the good life that God has for you in the abundant life.
Yeah, I think what kind of we've gotten at in the last 2 episodes really is that intentionality in life is very important.
Yes.
And AI used intentionally can be a good tool, and AI used unintentionally or like without intention can be very dangerous. And so it's like a lot of reflection about, and not just how am I using technology intentionally, but I think that's or AI intentionally, which is a good question. But am I living my entire life intentionally or unintentionally? Am I intentionally resting, or am I letting video games kind of consume me, or like, entertainment consume my quote unquote rest? Am I working intentionally, or am I kind of just getting pushed along or drug along by time, basically?
Yeah. So the question, kind of get to know you question is, has there ever been a time in life when you experienced like an extended power outage, like electrical power outage, and what happened with your family? Like, do you have a special family moment when that happened, or story of a power outage?
I can't remember a really long one. Yeah, we've had some that were inconveniently timed, like you're cooking dinner and then there's a power outage and you're like, seriously, like we need to bake this food. And so that happened this like a month or 2 ago. We had like one around dinner time, and it lasted for a few hours, which was unusual. But yeah, no fun story, sorry.
I think I can remember a lot of little ones, but we used to, because of one very big power outage, where we were like running out of water for the animals because our well wasn't pumping because of the power outage. It was like 3 days or something.
Wow.
And so from then on, we would fill our bathtubs up with water beforehand, before like a big storm every time, just in case, also for toilet flushing, right? But I do remember like the heat was out, right, and it was freezing cold, so we all kind of like gathered around and slept around the fireplace. And interestingly enough, the one kind of power we did have is we had like a boom box, and we played Adventures in Odyssey because it was battery powered boom box. And then we talked and played board games by candlelight.
That sounds fun.
So,
It sounds like a fun time, yeah.
It actually kind of makes me want to do like intentional power outage.
Yeah. That's where I'm getting.
1 day a week, 1 day a month, or 1 week.
1 hour a day.
1 hour a day, one day a month, and then 1 week a year.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Also known as camping.
No, what I remember is this wasn't really technically a power outage, but my family had a cabin in the mountains, and the first summer, like we were adopting this cabin or moving in or experiencing cabin life during the summer months, we had no electricity. And so there was a propane powered fridge, and there was a propane powered stove for cooking, but that was it. And so but I remember we had a blast that summer, and we actually had a propane lamp, and we'd read Chronicles of Narnia out loud.
Nice.
As a family that summer, and it was like one of my favorite summers. And it's interesting because a lot of families and people have a story similar to yours, Jake, where like the power went out And then we all got together as a family and we read something or we played a game. And they're like, that was such a great time. And it's like this ironic thing of like, do you know? You could actually turn the lights off and do that anytime.
Yeah.
But it's like being forced to do it.
Well, it's kind of like camp
Yeah.
for you, like youth kids and now we're I think at this point the only group when we go to camp that I say you can keep your cell phones on you, but if you use it for anything except for taking pictures or telling the time, then it's mine. And at camp, every other youth group has kids recording TikTok dances and posting on Instagram everything that they're doing. And some of my kids were like, well, what about like posting on Instagram? And I was like, you are allowed to take as many pictures as you want, but you are not allowed to post anything until we get back. Because you don't need that dopamine high of being on Instagram.
Yeah.
And you know what? When I've asked kids afterwards, they're like, wow, it was a great week. And then immediately they are back on it the next day doing all of the same things.
Yep. That sounds familiar. So again, that's our application, like that there is good life to be found beyond technology. So AI is great, technology is a good gift, but it's a tool that we can use wisely, but we also need to be cautious and embracing the fullness of being human the way God made us means taking breaks from it and not letting it rule our lives. So I hope you've enjoyed these conversations we've had about artificial intelligence, and hopefully this has given you some ideas to implement in your life and maybe some deeper understanding of how these tools are working in the background when maybe you didn't realize that before. But let's pray, and then we'll see you next time. God, I thank you for the gift that technology is. And I also thank you for the gift of all of life that you give us. And I pray for all of us that you would give us wisdom and discipline in the area of technology in general, especially as we consider the fact that the various tools and apps that we use are only going to get better with time, and that also actually means more addictive over time. And so give us self-control, but also give us just boundaries. And help us to choose to set aside time for that reflection and that intentionality and considering how we want to use the time that you've given us, because it all is a gift from you and there's good things we can choose to do with that. Give us all wisdom as we consider that. We ask these things in your name, Jesus. Amen.
Amen.